everybody, this is Eve West. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. This channel is dedicated to promoting a book I wrote. It's called Follow. It's an ebook. You can find it on Amazon.com under the Kindles tab. And it's a book that deals with spirituality, looking at spirituality in a holistic way, not just from a metaphysical standpoint, but also from a physical standpoint, which corresponds to the reptilian brain. That's what you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And so I focus on very controversial topics such as sex, money. I focus on race. And, these are things that we typically are told to, not really talk about, especially when it comes to spirituality. But they're very integral to who we are as spiritual beings, per se. I talk about the various constructs of the matrix and how they aim to divide the mind between the conscious and the unconscious mind. Some people call it Isis and Ra. That's what it's referred to in Egyptian mythology, or it's Adam and Eve in Christian theology. The New Age calls it the ego and the astral body. Freudian psychology calls it the ego and the id. And basically, in layman's terms, it's pretty much the God and the devil. I know that people typically, when they hear devil, they're like, oh my gosh, but devil just means veil, just unconscious. The devil is the veil of of your consciousness, of your ego, the things that you're not aware of. And so there's so much within the matrix that's fed to us subliminally that we don't become aware of it until the end of our incarnation. And this is when we experience what you would call crucifixion. And it's more, I guess you would say, in Freudian psychology, it's called cognitive dissonance. And so I'm really going to get into a lot of this, if you will, in this particular video. But all the various constructs of the matrix focus on dividing the mind, such as media and entertainment, religion, the familial structure, education, and the government structure itself. And so in this video, I really want to focus on the solar plexus. I want to focus on the solar plexus and focus on Kundalini. The solar plexus is, people refer to it, I refer to it as your earthly sacral. And so this is the part of you, because there's different energy systems within the body. And so the solar plexus is that energy system that is connected to your will. It is connected to your will and creativity. And one thing about the matrix is designed for you to fit into a cog. It's not designed for you to be a god. Let's just say that. It's not designed for you to be creative. It wants you to just be basically like a robot and just function solely by your reptilian brain, solely by what's shown to you, what you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And so when you get beyond what you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear, and your pineal gland opens up, people call it your third eye, you gain insight because it's more spiritual or psychological, I should say. Then you start to go beyond this, the senses. And so the senses are really hijacked by what you would call the Akashic record. It's referred to as the book of life in the Bible. And so the Akashic record is basically a record of all the thoughts, actions, and emotions of a human being from the beginning to the end of their incarnation. So it's basically, if you think about it in layman's terms, it's like software. It's like software, and it's connected to the zodiac. And so that's why, some people, they identify with their zodiac sign and they see certain attributes of their zodiac and they're like, oh, that's me. The reason why you identify oftentimes with your zodiac is because it is really a false you. You incarnated based upon a predetermined cookie cutter avatar. And so the avatar that I play is very philosophical because I play Sagittarius this time around. And Sagittarius is very philosophical, it's a thinker. Sagittarius, we don't really pay too much attention to detail per se. We are, more whimsical, if you will. And, these things are not innate to what I really am. It's just a glamour that's been painted upon my consciousness. And so it's very easy to fall victim to the type of avatar that I play this time around as Sagittarius, because it's a really good avatar. I like playing Sagittarius. Like I said, I like being so quote unquote smart. Although in my next incarnation, I'm supposed to be really dumb and stupid. I have less melanin, and so as a result, I won't have my divinity. But I like playing Sagittarius. Sagittarius is connected to Jesus in the Bible, and so Jesus definitely, the character of Jesus, is really polarized. But one aspect of Jesus is very much against the what you call quote unquote government, and against the matrix, basically against the Pharisees. And so my avatar definitely is against what you would call the updated or the new world Pharisees, the Pharisees of our time, the elite, as you call them. And so when we look at the word elite, we see L. And the word El actually corresponds to the ancient Hebrew name for Saturn, which is allegorically depicted as Satan in the Bible. And so really, to be honest with you, Jesus just represents, in a way, one aspect of Jesus represents the spiritual fighting the earthly. And so really, to be honest with you, as I, evolve in consciousness, I'm not really trying to destroy the physical. That's not really why I'm here. The whole idea is to marry the physical, for the physical, the spiritual, and the physical to become one. And so this is what you would call God's status. But the rulers of this realm, if you will, they would prefer you to be one or the other. Either you're spiritual or you're earthly, and they have you go back and forth between the spiritual and the earthly. But it's important to ground your desires into the physical, so you don't have to reincarnate, because reincarnation is a prison. You feel like compelled to come back into a body, because when you die, you go to heaven. You are in a place of stasis, so you can do whatever you want in heaven. If you think it, you can manifest it and experience it. In the astral realm, when you astral travel. But that doesn't give any balance. And so you will naturally want to seek a limitation and be back in a body, because you can do whatever you want to do in heaven. And so going back to that song, what is it? Heaven is a place on earth. And that Christmas song, what is it? Joy to the World, where it says heaven and nature sing. So heaven and nature are supposed to sing together. You're not supposed to neglect any aspect of yourself. You're not supposed to neglect God or the devil. If you're neglecting the so-called quote-unquote devil, then that is not a true being per se of God. And I used to be at that point, when I saw things that were considered to be so-called quote-unquote bad or evil. I used to say, oh my gosh, that person is evil, is horrible, and I was in a place of judgment. But when you start to see yourself in the other, then you really reach a higher level of consciousness, and you say to yourself, okay, the matrix makes us who we are here, and so because of that, there's no reason to judge anyone, no reason to judge others, nor to judge myself. But the rulers of this realm, they definitely want you to judge yourself, and they definitely judge you. And they want you to feel bad. They want you to feel bad about yourself. And they actually, toward the end of your incarnation, you go through a process of crucifixion. And so they try to bring you to judgment, like they did Jesus, in the story of Jesus in the Bible. So I really want to talk about the solar plexus and talk about sexual abuse, because the solar plexus is actually the seat, like I said, of your creativity and your will. It's where your genitals are housed. And so one of the main ways to destroy the soul is to molest a child, to sexually abuse a child, because like I said, when you're sexually abusing, you're desecrating the soul. You are imbalancing that chakra system where the genitals are housed. And so that's why that's why within the Catholic Church, you see there's a connection there. There's definitely a connection between molesting children and the church. And so it's kind of like I don't know, I really wanted to just kind of bridge or make a correlation between the two because when it comes to Christianity, you look at the suffix of the word Christian. The IAN in Christian actually means a variant or part of Christ. It does not mean Christ. And so, since Christian means a part of Christ, It's not holy. And so Christianity in and of itself is not holy. And I know that's not going to go over well with Christians, but it's really not, because as a Christian, you are taught to embrace your psychological mind, you know? And psychological is spiritual. But you have an earthly aspect. So whenever you are embellishing the psychological, but you are neglecting the earthly becomes very disgusting and filthy and nasty. And so the thing is that the more that we embrace the psychological mind, and that's what happens when you are molested. When you are molested and your solar plexus, or what they call your kundalini, is rotted out, you become psycho or psychological or psychic. Like for me, I'm very psychic. And so, you know, because I'm very psychic, that means that my earthly is very filthy and disgusting. There's not really much balance, if you will, with it. And so Christianity and being Christian teaches you to be imbalanced. And not only is it's not only you know, teaching you to be imbalanced, but it's glorifying being imbalanced. You know, it was so funny when I looked at the documentary from the Pope, and he said that, you know, we've plundered Mother Earth. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you know, whenever you are embellishing the psychological mind, neglecting the earthly, I mean, that's plundering the earth, and the earth is the body. And so, you know, I felt that, you know, from my point of view, that was very hypocritical, very hypocritical, to say, you know, we've plundered the earth, but everything within the matrix and everything within our religions teaches us to neglect the earthly, so it becomes nasty, filthy, and disgusting. And so, you know, I use different examples, like for example, 19 Kids and Counting and the Duggars, and how the Duggars are, you know, they're a family where they have over 19 kids. And so that shows right there the devolution of the physical. They're so super psycho or psychological and spiritual per se, that they feel an urge to copulate, and that's resulted in all these kids. And not to mention that all of them have the letter J. All of their names begin with the letter J. And you know, it's a lot of they're always quick to get married because they have physical needs, and so they don't feel at liberty to actually meet those physical needs unless they are married. And so, you know, a lot of the kids in the family, a lot of the girls had gotten molested because they're super psycho. They even look psycho to me. It's like Josiah and Josie, and you know, and they just look very much like they look like little puppets. They don't look real. And when I say real, you know, they don't look human. They don't look human to me. They look very plastic, I should say. And so, you know, whenever you are unholy, in which from my esoteric definition they are unholy, then it results in a devolution of your physical state. And so the fact that they have over 19 kids shows a devolution. You know, the fact that they have sexual molestation in their family shows there's a devolution. You know, the fact that, you know, there's, you know, overall it's just not natural. What they're doing is not natural. And so I like to use them as an example to show what happens when you are not honoring your earthly, but you're embellishing your psychological. And so the solar plexus has a lot to do with that. And the imbalance of that solar plexus really devolves. And so I'm going to talk about my molestation, and how, you know, whenever you're molesting a child, you're cultivating a desire for sex at an early age. When you cultivate a desire for sex at an early age, it floods the nervous system of the child with dopamine, or dope, or drugs as people call it, because anything that gives artificial gratification in the matrix is considered dope. You know, if you eat, you know, if you participate in gluttony, that gives you a lot of dope, that floods dopamine into the brain. Or say for example, when you have sex, that floods dopamine into the brain. If you take drugs, right, that floods dopamine into the brain. And so, you know, when you're debasing the solar plexus and actually you know, short-circuiting the nervous system of the child will actually start to dissociate. And so the Christ aspect of the child will leave. The holiness, the holy aspect of the child will leave. And so what do I mean by that? Well, kids do not seek to copulate because they're more holy, although they identify with a genitalia, with being male or female, and from a psychological standpoint, because I don't want you to think of male and female so much in terms of gender, but I want you to think about it in terms of a state of mind. And so kids don't really seek outside of themselves for completion. And when you want to have sex and copulate, you have a need, or you're horny, right? Horns associated with the unconscious mind, the devil, the veil. So when you are horny, you seek to, there's an unconscious aspect of you that you want to find union with. So if you're feminine, you want to find union with the masculine. If you're masculine, you want to find union with the feminine. But little kids do not do that because little kids are holy. They're not far removed from their holy spiritual selves. And so they don't seek to copulate, and they're not judgmental. And that's another indication that judgment in this reality is the lowest taxonomy of knowledge, because kids are not judgmental, because their kundalini is intact, and their earthly sacral solar plexus is more so intact and not debased by that point. They don't really judge. They don't really care about you. Kids don't care if you have one arm or one eye, or they don't care if your hair doesn't look good. They don't care what type of car you drive. They don't care what your bank account looks like. Kids just really, see beyond the superficial, and they just want to have fun. They just want to play. And so that's really how you are on the astral. You're very much kid-like. You're not saturated and conditioned and indoctrinated into the matrix yet. And it's not until you are indoctrinated within the matrix that you begin to want to seek the other and seek sexuality and copulation. It's during puberty that you seek another body, so to speak. And so that's how you know that you've been indoctrinated, how your kids have been indoctrinated into the matrix. But you're not born with that. You're not born with wanting someone else. You feel more, kids can play by themselves for hours. They don't need anybody else. They can find something and say, oh, they can find happiness and what have you. But why is it that the older that you get, you feel like you need the other? Like I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I need this, or I need that, or I need this person to feel holy. So they don't really necessarily feel like that. The more the merrier for them, but it's not like a necessity, so to speak. So, and talking about that and talking about the solar plexus, the solar plexus is Jesus. The solar plexus is Jesus. And I know people, in the matrix, we've been taught that, Jesus is quote unquote, this man, what have you, or Yeshua, whatever the case is. But Jesus really just means sun, and solar is sun. So Jesus is really referring to your solar plexus. So the whole idea of Jesus has a very occult meaning. And the information that we've been fed about Jesus is really an omission of the truth. It's an omission of the truth, and it's not the total truth. And they're not really telling us exactly what it's representing. But the sun is Jesus, okay? It's the solar plexus, the Son of God. So we're God, and so the sun is the belly, is the solar plexus. And so the solar plexus is the thing that is targeted within the matrix, because you are not supposed to be creative here. You're supposed to fit into a cog. You're given, this is like a concentration camp, really. And so, when you're born with your Jew, I would say the Star of David, right? Esoterically, you're born with your Jew, masculine and feminine capabilities intact. So both of your triangles are intact. And so as children, you're seen as a threat. Children are seen as a threat. And so that's why children are definitely targeted within the matrix, and you're smoothed out through the educational system, and your parents are programmed, and so they definitely program you through your parents and your familial structure to saturate you and to get you indoctrinated, if you will. But they definitely see children as a threat. I wanted to talk about how, beta sex kitten slaves, and I wanted to talk about, because I mentioned beta sex kitten slaves my last video, and so, many people have, I guess you would say false, concepts, if you will, about what a beta sex kitten slave is. But beta is the brain frequency of the ego, just to kind of go back to some of what I spoke about. And so the ego is in a very fast brainwave state, and so whenever your brainwave is in beta, which is not a meditative state but a very chaotic state, you don't catch everything. The ego is only conditioned to pay attention to a few things: your particular religion, your particular education, your particular friends, your particular family, the things that you particularly like, the music you like. The ego is very, quote unquote, in a way narcissistic. So you're only tuned into things that pertain to you. So that is beta. And so this is how we make beta sex kitten slaves. And also too, because you're made into a cog, if you will, it's like, because your masculine is so deflated, your kundalini, your earthly sacral, your solar plexus is rotted out, then you become super masculine on the astral realm. And so, as an ego, you're feminine, but on the astral realm, you're masculine. So your unconscious is masculine, because whenever you are making someone beta, a beta slave is someone who has restriction. You feel restricted. And when you feel restricted by laws and rules and societal norms and things like that, you have to go every night when you go to sleep to the astral realm to work out those restrictions. And when you give up the mind and body on the astral realm, you work out those restrictions before you have to reincarnate back if you did not work out those restrictions in physicality. And so, I really wanted to actually parallel the connection between beta sex kitten slaves and saints, because a saint is nothing but a filthy, disgusting, degenerate whore. And that's why the Catholic Church values saints. They value saints, and they revere saints because saints are imbalanced. Saints are psychics. Saints are psychotics, if you will. And so me saying that, people are not going to really, necessarily jive with what I'm saying, but that's fine. I really don't care. In terms of, if you agree or disagree with what I'm saying. But when it comes to esoteric information, saints are super duper psychological, spiritual per se. And so whenever, you are denying the earthly aspect of yourself, it manifests into filthiness. And so that's why the Catholic Church, you see a lot of molestation of the boys and stuff like that from the priests, because the priests are forbidden to marry and to copulate with women. And so, whenever there's a restriction on your sexual nature and your will, and you're putting a law and a rule for someone not to do something, first of all, it makes someone want to do it even more. So if someone says you can't have sex, that automatically makes you want to have sex from a conscious or unconscious standpoint. And, and when it's unconscious, it's even worse, because there's something that you want to do that you don't even know that you want to do. And so that's when a lot of filthiness can kind of creep into the mind. And then, you find yourself molesting kids, and you're like, oh, what made me do that? And then you think that you're to yourself that you're a horrible person. And really, I don't look at the person who's molested. I'm looking at the construct. That's the thing about this reality, or this realm, or Reich, or whatever you want to call it, because it's a form of Nazism. But, it's intended to blame the sinner instead of the sinner maker, if you will. So if priests could copulate, could marry, could actually have a decision in terms of what they want to do with their earthly nature, then you wouldn't see all of this filthiness within the Catholic Church and all these cover-ups and stuff like that they've that they've been having to do. I've heard the Pope took a long time to address the issues in terms of sexual molestation and sexual abuse, that's connected to the Catholic Church. And so you ask yourself, why? Why is that? Why did he take so long to address these things? And I feel that he had to. He had to at a certain point, because and really, I'm not really referring so much when I'm talking about the Pope. I'm not really referring to the Pope that we see. The Pope that we see is just a puppet. But I'm talking about the real Pope, the Pope that actually governs the souls of this reality beyond this world. And so, everything in the physical is just a manifestation from the metaphysics, from a realm that's beyond this animus, if you will, that we're locked into. And so, whenever you have, whenever your organization, if you will, and everything your organization is built upon will fall when you have constructs that actually makes a person deviant, if you will. It makes a person deviant. You have to be able to relax restrictions so people can make a conscious choice about what they want to do, instead of feeling like this is something that they have to do. It's like, oh, you can't serve God if you don't, lead a life of chastity, or whatever it is, poverty, and all of this stuff, all these things that they preach. And really, that's being unholy. And so those aspects of you will want to find connection to you. The earthly aspect of you will want to find connection to you before you ascend. And if you don't find connection, then you will be back in hell. This is hell. That's why they have us greet each other with hello. So they like us staying in hell, and they want us to be in hell forever. And as robots, they want us to be here just governed by what we can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear, and not to have any divinity of our pineal gland, because it helps us to see past the constructs of the matrix. And when you can see past the constructs of the matrix that divide the mind, then you can ground your desires into physical reality. You don't have to be a slave anymore. You are conscious, and when you come into this reality, you don't come into it being stupid. When you reincarnate, you come in here being stupid, and they want you to be stupid so you can come back. People are like, oh, this conscious movement is so wonderful. But really, to be honest with you, if you're not really conscious coming into the matrix, then it's really not going to help you very much toward the end of your incarnation. Because the damage has already been done. Like, for example, with me, when my Kundalini resurfaced, if you will, or my solar plexus, or Jesus returned, right? Solar plexus, sun, Jesus. And so when my solar plexus started returning, I experienced a lot of what I call cognitive dissonance. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a bit. But this cognitive dissonance is what we call crucifixion. But the thing is that, the Bible is riddled with occult information. And so the way that masters read the Bible is not the way that slaves read it. And so think to yourself, slaves were given the Bible when they were when they were in bondage, not even given the Bible, taught the Bible. Like, when you think about people, and we're taught the Bible, we go to church and they tell us the Bible. They say, turn to this scripture. So they pick out a scripture and they teach from that particular scripture. But if you really sat down to read the Bible, you would start to look at it not from your, gain information from your temporal lobe, whereas a lot of things get past your frontal lobe, or your pineal gland, your third eye. But when someone's telling you something, it goes a lot into your unconscious. But if you read it for yourself, you will see that there's a lot of, I guess you would say, unconscious. There's a lot of occult meaning behind certain things. And also, too, they keep changing the Bible so much that, it really hides. It really, really, really hides the true meaning. And so I'm just going to really look at a book of the Bible that that you don't really see a whole lot. This part of the Bible, or you don't see preachers focus on. In fact, I've never seen a preacher focus on this particular book. It's only one chapter. And never, have I heard, my mom, for example, mention this book. I've never turned on TV and heard Joel Osteen talk about this book. I've never heard Joyce Myers or Pastor Stanley. I've never heard Creflo Dollar or T.D. Jakes or Bishop Eddie Long. I've never heard any of these so-called preachers talk about this book, because the reason why they don't talk about this book is because this book actually gives very occult information in terms of, going past the superficial of reading the Bible. For example, in Philemon 1:7, and this is the name of the book, is called, or Philemon. It might be called Philemon. I'm not sure you can see that. Darn, it has really, really bad glare. Okay, here we go. And so in Philemon 1:7, it's talking about, I did a translation, so I went back and forth in the book of Philemon between the King James Version and, in the NIV version. And so when you look at the difference between the NIV and the King James Version of these scriptures that I picked out here, you will see that the word bowels and heart are interchangeable. Bowels and heart. And so, what is the bowel? The bowel is your stomach, right? And your stomach is your solar plexus. It's Jesus. And so it's talking about saints in this particular chapter. And so you say to yourself, and it's replacing the word bowel with hearts. And so think to yourself, why did they replace bowel with heart? It's a little interesting. It's a little, strange, right? Because you wouldn't think of your bowel, which is your stomach, as your heart, right? But it goes to show that your bowels, which is connected to your solar plexus, solar being sun being Jesus, right? All these occult connections to the Bible. When you look at that, you see that your solar plexus is connected to your heart. That's why oftentimes when you see Jesus, his heart is in chains. You see Jesus' heart in chains. And so your heart is connected to your solar plexus, because your solar plexus is connected to your will, to your creativity, connected to, what you want to do and your desires and that type of thing. And so, we're taught here in this realm to not embrace our desires. We are taught to, to put them really in the unconscious mind, because we don't have enough money or time to ground them. But when you have the solar plexus, and when your solar plexus is rotating in balance, then, you can manifest anything at will. Your will comes back. And so your solar plexus is connected to your will. But we're taught to not embrace our will. And I had a viewer that posed this question to me. He was like, what's the significance of the solar plexus? And I told him, I said, the solar plexus ensures that you don't have to be reincarnated, because you can manifest your desires at will. And so I said, well, let me make this, let me break this down so human beings can understand. For example, let's say you, there's a donut shop that opened up down the street. And so, you really want to, eat at that donut shop, but you just, You just embarked on a new diet. And so in embarking on that new diet, you say to yourself, well, I need to stay away from that donut shop, right? So what happens? God and the devil, in other words, your conscious and your unconscious is really at war with each other. So God is like, I want to, look sexy and look like that Victoria's Secret model, whatever, and stay on my diet and, and have some self-control, right? And not give in to temptation. But the devil is like, I really don't care. I really want the donut. And that's what I want. And so the Matrix teaches us that you're on a diet. You need to stick to your diet, okay? And so human nature kind of gives way, and you may cheat. You may say, you know what, I'm going to go to the donut shop. And you say, I just have like one donut, and that one donut is so good. And so you may go back like the next week and get maybe a couple more. And so you find yourself at the donut shop most weeks. And so you say to yourself, well, what is this? My diet is shot to hell right at this point. And since it's shot to hell, I'm gaining weight back, or I'm gaining weight, putting on more weight and so forth, because I can't stay away from this donut shop. And so the reason why you are gaining weight, you can't stay away from the donuts or whatever, the sweets, is because you're working against your nature. And so if you were to go to the donut shop and get a dozen of those donuts and really wholeheartedly embrace them and eat all of them, I guarantee you will not want to go back to that donut shop. And ask yourself, why is that? Why would you not want to go back to the donut shop? Or, you really wouldn't want to go back very often after that. It's because you've grounded that desire. You've burned out that desire. We call that in terms of an addiction, we call it hitting a bottom. When you hit a bottom, you really say to yourself, I really just don't have a want or a desire for that particular thing anymore. And, once you ground that desire and eat those donuts till your heart's content, and you're like, oh, I don't really want them anymore. When you do go back to the donut shop, you really wholeheartedly will want one or two. If you do go back, you really won't want a dozen of them. It's something that it's a desire that you grounded through your ego. And since you grounded it through your ego, you are living in more balance. You're living in more balance, and you're not living in a sense of, I have to have this. And so whenever you're trying to stay away from your nature is when you reincarnate, if you will. And so when we die here, because we don't have the full functioning of our kundalini, it's not functioning in balance, we don't have the knowledge to ground our desires into physical reality, so we feel compelled to have to come back to the physical realm. Because in heaven, where the nirvana, when the nerve is cut, right, in heaven, or the astral realm, you have no nerve. And so when you have no nerve, in other words, you don't have any feelings, you feel at liberty to just ground your desires, and you will hit a plateau or a stasis, if you will, of experiencing. And when you hit that stasis, you naturally will seek the other aspect of yourself. And so in heaven, you're super masculine, but you will want that feminine, restrictive aspect of yourself in a body, so you'll come back to the physical realm eventually. So I wanted to really just kind of talk about that in relation to Philemon, because the book of Philemon uses the words bow and hearts interchangeably. And so, like I said, the bow is your solar plexus, it is your stomach. And so your heart is connected to your solar plexus. That's the part of you that has to rise up to the pineal gland, where the solar plexus, or the pituitary gland, and the pineal gland are unite. And so that's why you see in ancient Egypt how they have that snake that comes out of the middle of their forehead, or the pineal gland. That's because they're Christ beings, or Jews. A Jew, from an esoteric standpoint, can manifest at will. Okay? So a Jew can manifest at will. Many Jewish people, right, looking at the words ish, I-S-H, Jewish, many Jewish people have wealth, but Jews are wealth. And since you are wealth, you don't have to go to anyone for wealth. Money will become obsolete at that point. You don't need anybody to pay you anything if you have the knowledge. But they have removed the knowledge from us to keep us slaves here forever. So, but let's look at some scriptures from Philemon. It says, for we have great joy and consolation, and this is Philemon 1:7, excuse me. It says, we have great joy and consolation in thy love, because the bowels of the saints are refreshed by thee, brother. And I repeat that, because the bowels of the saints are refreshed. That's what it says. Bowels are refreshed. So the stomach is refreshed. Now, if you look at the NIV translation, it says, your love has given me great joy and encouragement, because you, brother, have refreshed the hearts of the saints. And so why is it that it says in the King James Version, the bowels of the saints? But then it says in the NIV, the hearts of the saints. It's telling you that the bowels is the heart. Jesus is the bowels. He is, that's why the heart, when you see Jesus, oftentimes his heart is in chains. The bowels is the solar plexus, solar connected to sun. Let's look at another one. This is Philemon 1:12. It says, whom I have sent again, thou therefore receive him, that is mine own bowels. Okay, so this is Philemon 1:12, chapter 1, verse 12. But the NIV translation says, I am sending him who is my very heart back to you. So here again, you see that these words are being used interchangeably. Okay, bow and heart. Why are they being used interchangeably? It's because the heart is the bowel. It is the solar plexus. And so, the thing about it is, the reason why I'm showing you these scriptures is to show you that the Freemasons that created this stuff, the way that slaves read the Bible is not the way that a master reads it. A master actually has knowledge, so a master knows. But, a slave reading these scriptures will really think they're talking about bowels, really. You know what I mean? Or in the NIV, they're really talking about hearts, per se. The person will not recognize and see the correlation between how bowel and heart is related to the solar plexus. And so, it's very, it makes me very angry that this type of information is revealed toward the end of your incarnation. But if you had this information in the beginning, then you would be balanced. You know what I mean? You would be balanced. And so, it's the fact that, you're being fed information, and you're being deceived, and they're like, and it's funny because the people that govern this existence, they feel that if they just reveal this information to you towards the end, that it's that they're off the hook. But that's not true, because the damage has already been done and you've already been imbalanced, and so there's no way for them to actually get off the hook. The people that run this hellhole for the Jews need to be brought to judgment. And so all these stipulations and lies and omissions of the truth, they're lawyers in a sick room, basically. Lawyers in a courtroom. And so the fact that they feel that they can create laws to get around what they've done is very sick and sadistic and filthy and disgusting. And the people that govern this existence, they disgust me. But let's look at some more Philemon. So it says, Philemon 1:20, ye brother, let me have joy of thee in the Lord, refresh my bowels in the Lord. But then the NIV says, I do wish, brother, that I may have some benefit from you in the Lord, refresh my heart in Christ. So again, bowel and heart is used interchangeably between the King James Version and the NIV version. And so again, your bowel is your stomach, and your stomach is your solar plexus. Solar means sun, sun is Jesus, and that's why we see Jesus having his heart in chains. And so, really, to be honest with you, the entire matrix environment is to really put your heart in chains. It is to put your heart in chains. It's really to rob you of your will, which is your free will, right? Your ability to manifest at will. It is to rob you of your creativity. You fit into this cog. It's like when you're born into the world and your family is Christian, you're going to be Christian. That's a cog. If you're born into a family that's Jewish, you're going to be Jewish. If you're born into a family that's Muslim, you're going to be Muslim. That is restricting your free will. As a child, you don't have free will. You can't say coming out of the womb, I don't want to be Christian. You can't say coming out of the womb, I don't want to be Muslim. It's up to your handler, which is your parent. Your parent is your first handler. And so you descend here as a slave. You're being imbalanced out. So, like for me, it's okay if you are, you are Christian because of your own free will. But I was not Christian because of my own free will. If I had free will as a child, quote unquote a slave, I would not have been Christian, because being Christian and fed a lot of light scripture such as turn the other cheek and love thy neighbor and so forth, it taught me to be very docile. And it taught me to neglect my masculine aspect of myself. Didn't teach me balance. So I was purposely fed light scripture to imbalance and to make me super duper psycho. In other words, super psychological, super spiritual. In other words, like I said, psychological, focusing on the mind. If you say to someone, if someone slaps you in the cheek, turn to him the other. What are you really saying? If someone slaps you, and I ask Christians this too. If someone slaps you, what's your first inclination? Is it to turn the other cheek? Maybe the Duggards would. I think they would. It's really not. Your masculine side of you would kick in, and you would at least say, want to say, what the hell is wrong with you? At least, you might call the police because you've been physically assaulted. You may cuss or maybe even hit the person back. That would be a more genuine, per se, response than turning the other cheek. And if you do turn the other cheek, this masculine aspect of you would be very angry. And you're unconscious, you would want to hit that person, or you would want to at least, cuss that person out, or seek some type of justice, right? In terms of what happened to you. And so if you don't ground that within your physical ego, then you're going to ground that on the astral realm. So guess what? You might be turning the other cheek like the Duggards would do, right? As a physical ego. But on the astral, when the Duggards go to sleep at night, they're not turning the other cheek. The Duggards are crazy. They are very menacing, people on the astral realm because they're denying the earthly. And so when we have this type of light scripture, Christianity, going back to, fitting into a cog, and how this matrix reality is designed to take away the masculine aspect of you. We descend here as slaves, so we don't have a choice. We fit into a cog. It's so funny, because I used to think, oh, I just fell into teaching. You know what I mean? I used to think to myself, oh, this just happened. But my mom used to make me sing a song by Whitney Houston. It's called The Greatest Love of All. And so in The Greatest Love of All, it talks about teaching children and so forth, and the children are our future, and so forth. She would make me sing this song over and over and over again as a child in a theta brainwave frequency, which is, because kids are in a theta brainwave frequency before the age of 7. And I call this the Christ frequency because you can prime the mind for anything, for whatever type of duality you want the child to experience, good or bad. And so I was conditioned. I was conditioned to be a teacher. That was not something that I wanted. It was decided upon before I actually descended into this reality. It was already chosen. So this goes to the Akashic record, which you call the Book of Life, or what have you. These things do not happen by chance. It's already been decided who you will be according to the wheel of the zodiac. And so the whole purpose of this construct is to make sure you don't get beyond the rainbow, that you don't get beyond the Akashic record or the scripture. That's why the Bible is written in scripture. It's all a play of existence. It's a recording or a movie. It is not necessarily what you would consider to be quote unquote reality. And so, really, the Kundalini returns so you can get beyond the script. The solar plexus comes back so you can get beyond the script. But the solar plexus, when it does return, is very imbalanced. Like I said, my solar plexus was imbalanced when I was a little kid and I was molested. And I was shown pornography and things like that to short circuit my nervous system and to cause me to have orgasms at a very young age. And so, because it was super feminine, I was made super feminine as a kid, then now it's come back to where it wants to make me super masculine. And so this other aspect of myself, this masculine aspect of myself that has not been honored, it seeks to find realization through me in a very nasty, filthy, disgusting, and debased way. And so I wanted to put light and shed light on that. And this brings your soul to judgment. And so the people that orchestrate this hellhole, they do that. They actually orchestrate and facilitate an environment to bring you to judgment, and to take away your free will. And so this is where crucifixion comes into play. And so when I get into crucifixion and how crucifixion ties into contradictions and cognitive dissonance, okay? The thing is that in this reality, this is like a subliminal reality. Like when Neo goes to see the what you call it, he goes to see the architect, and the architect said the first matrix we made was sublime. You know, so whenever you are being fed information subliminally, you are a slave. You're not conscious. You're not aware of it. And so when it comes down to subliminals in a way is kind of like hypnosis. You're in a slower brainwave frequency, and whenever you're in a slower brainwave frequency, and you are feeding contradictions into the mind, it jumbles up the mind. It destroys the mind. It destroys the mind. So what does that mean? Like, for example, within our reality, they cultivate a desire for the 7 deadly sins. They cultivate a desire for gluttony, for wrath, for lust, vanity, and all these various things. However, if we try to ground those desires, then we are judged. And so this causes a contradiction. And so, the whole matrix is based upon that. If I'm overweight, you're like, oh, you're overweight, you need to lose weight. Or, you have an illness that's quote unquote connected to your diet. However, although you said that I'm overweight, if I look at television, all I see is a smorgasbord of foods. Think about the food commercials. They are filled with gluttony. When you go to the food court, the mall, they're always forcing food down your throat, samples and things like that. Try this, try that. That's gluttony. That's promoting gluttony. You can't turn on the radio without them advertising some food, or you can't drive down the road without seeing food being advertised on billboards. But you're saying to the consciousness, why are you overweight? Why do you have diabetes? No one ever really thought that this is strange. I do. As far as like lust, you know what I mean? You say to me, you're a whore. You're a filthy, nasty whore. You're judged for that. But every time I turn on the television, all I see is filthy, nasty, lust. Everything is about lust. Everything's about sex. Listen to the music. Ass, 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 ass. Sorry. Nicki Minaj and Big Sean are talking about ass, and they keep saying over and over again, so it's repetitious. Ass, 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 ass. Okay? So you are talking about this. You see, I see the Reese's, there was a commercial for Reese's chocolate bunny for Easter, actually, and it was singing the song Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye. Subliminally, programming you for sex, cultivating a desire for lust. But if I'm a whore, you say, oh my gosh, why are you a whore? You're so filthy and disgusting. Does that make any sense? You're feeding contradictions into the mind. People think that this is harmless. You think you're conscious. You're not conscious of this. I know people, from the superficial. I know people looking at this from the superficial level, the superficial, are not aware that this is happening to their consciousness. And if they do say, I'm aware of it, then that's different. But most people are not aware of it. So you can't make a conscious choice about being a whore. You can't make a conscious choice about being overweight. You can't make a conscious choice about, being violent. You can, video games are so real nowadays. You kill people for hours. But then if you kill someone in real life, it's like, oh, you know what? You're going to jail. Well, you're putting contradictions into the mind. You can't feed contradictions into the mind in a subliminal, unconscious way and not expect that it's going to affect the mind when the conscious is being bridged with the unconscious. So, although the New Age movement promotes consciousness, if you will, the mind is the totality of all of existence. They call it the collective unconscious. So the ego that's really nice and sweet and judges being gluttonous and judges being a whore and judges being violent and all the 7 deadly sins, guess what? You are a whore. You are gluttonous. You are violent. You're all those things. You're the devil or the veil or the unconscious on the astral realm that is actually that is actually perpetuating all of these things that are fed subliminally into your consciousness. And you get judged for that at the end. That's to me, who could explain that to me? I want someone to explain that to me. I doubt seriously that I would get 33 comments on this channel explaining to me these contradictions that are fed. And in looking at contradictions, not only do I look at them in terms via the various constructs of the matrix, such as media entertainment, but also look at them in terms of our spiritual doctrines. You know, when I looked through the Bible and looked at the contradictions, I literally felt sick. I literally felt mentally ill. Because I saw that there were so many contradictions, and within A Course in Miracles, the contradictions are even worse. You know, because in the Bible, contradictions sometimes skip chapters, you know, skips paragraphs and so forth. But the contradictions that I found in the Bible, you know, the contradictions that I found in the Bible and A Course in Miracles were just so many of them. And just to read you a few of them, for example, 1 John 2:15 says, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him." But then it says, what is it? John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life." So why is it in 1 John 2:15 it says don't love the world because love of the Father is not in you, but then it shows that the Father or God loved the world so much that he gave his only Son, right? That means that he really loved it. Then it goes back in James 4:4, and it reads, "Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whosoever will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God." Why is it such a contradiction? I mean, there's so many of them. Ephesians 6:5, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ, right? So what is that really saying? Obey your earthly masters, or obey, what is it? You know, well, hell at this point, but earth, you know, the way that you would obey the spiritual. So the earthly and the spiritual, obey both realms. But then it says in Matthew 6:24, "No man can obey two masters." But you just said to obey Christ, you know, obey the earthly masters like you would obey Christ. But you said no man can obey two masters. That's a contradiction. And actually it contradicts again. Luke 16:13, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon." Okay, you just said that you cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon meaning what? Earthly masters. But you just said, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. That's different than obeying, serving God, saying that you cannot serve God and mammon. There's a contradiction. Romans 8:8, "So then they that are in the flesh cannot please God." But Matthew 5 says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect." Why are you saying that, you know, I can't please God in the flesh in Romans, but saying in Matthew that I have to be as perfect as my Father is perfect? That's a contradiction. John 3:17, "For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved." So he's saying here, my Son is not here to judge the world, but to save the world. However, if you look at the NIV, especially of John 5:22, it says, "Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son." And it's so funny when I bring this, these scriptures to people, and they try to skate around it. Like one woman, she was like, "Well, I interpret it differently. If I entrust something to you, that means I give you it's your job. I entrust it. I'm not doing it. As the Father, I'm not judging. But I entrust you, Son, to judge it." That's what it's saying. It's so funny how people act really slow. They're supposed to be so educated. But they barely, they act at this point that they don't understand what words mean now. It's very odd. So, There's just so many contradictions. Deuteronomy 28:30, thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. And then Exodus chapter 20:14 reads, thou shalt not commit adultery. I mean, it's saying here that, in Deuteronomy, the Lord is saying that he's going to cause someone else to sleep with your wife if you don't follow his commandments. However, it's saying thou shalt not commit adultery. But the Lord is ordaining adultery here in Deuteronomy. I don't understand, and I've heard the argument on this one. Someone said, well, this happens as a result of your actions or what have you. No, that's not what he's saying. It says in the Bible that the Lord will cause vexations and curses to fall upon you if you don't follow his commandment. It is not a result of your doing. That's like, for example, if I told my daughter, put air in your tire. Put air in your tire. And, let's say she doesn't listen to my commandment, and as a result, she gets a flat tire. So I could, quote unquote, blame her for that, right? But if I say to my daughter, put air in your tire, and if you don't put any air in your tire, I'm going to give you a flat tire, that's totally different. And so, when you start to wake up in the matrix and you start to look at the Bible in terms of a master, you start to look at the law and you start to see the holes within the law. It's kind of like the LSATs. Like when I was at USC, I took a, you know how they had those little introductory courses, like University 101 or something. Yeah, that's what it was called, University 101, just those exploratory classes to see what type of major you want. And, when I first went to USC, I was going to be pre-law. I was pre-law. But when I found out that you could major in any any field or whatever, you can have any major and still go to law school, I said to myself, okay, well, I won't, put all my eggs in one basket. But when I looked at the LSAT, and looked at the structure of the LSAT is designed to have you look at the law in a very objective way to see the holes in the law, and so, by me pointing out Deuteronomy and how, that correlates to that example with my daughter, and how, the Lord putting something upon you is different than if something naturally happens. It goes to show that, the contradictions within the Bible. It really shows that this doctrine is really designed to create, in my opinion, a slave mentality. That's why slaves were taught the Bible. Why else? Come on now. You got slaves. Of course you don't want them to run away. And so, since you don't want them to run away, you have to enslave their what? Their minds. You've got to enslave their mind. If you enslave their minds, then you've enslaved their body, because body is mind, right? All right? So you've got their mind, you've got their body. And so really, when you look at the Bible, a lot of it is to invoke fear. And in invoking fear, you definitely take people away from their feeling body and put them more into their psychological mind, because fear is all about psychology. It's all about the mind. And so when you're in fear, you're not living in integrity. When you're in fear, your free will is taken away. You know what I mean? Your free will is taken away. You don't do something because you're afraid something's going to happen. You know what I mean, to you. You don't do what you want to do. Your will is taken. And so the whole purpose of the makers of this reality is to take away your free will. That's what they're here for. They're here to take away your free will. I want to focus on, the Kundalini, or the earthly sacral solar plexus, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty much the same thing. And look at these contradictions and how they create something called cognitive dissonance. And so I equate cognitive dissonance to crucifixion. Okay. I actually equate cognitive dissonance to crucifixion. When you're being crucified in the matrix, you're going to be put against yourself. Okay, you're put against yourself. And when you're put against yourself, you, you are, really becoming a new being. And so it's hard for you to stay within the body. because your old way of thinking is really changed with your new way of thinking. And so that definitely causes a war within you. What do I mean by that? Like, just going back to religion, you know, because religion was a big part of my programming. You know, I was taught that, you know, Jesus died for my sins, right? I wasn't taught about the solar plexus or, or the occult meanings behind what the Bible's about. I was taught that, you know, Jesus died for my sins. And, you know, since Jesus died for my sins, you know, that, you know, I was to worship him. I was to worship him and to, you know, go to church and that type of thing. And Jesus existed and he died on a cross physically and all of this stuff. And so, you know, I said to myself, well, okay, that's interesting. And then when I, you know, when I started waking up in the Matrix and I found out that Jesus' name wouldn't have been Jesus, given the letter J didn't exist during the time that he would have walked the earth, then things started to change. And then when I found out in one of the books of the Bible that Jesus did not even die on the cross, that Joseph and Nicodemus go to get Jesus' body and give him myrrh, which is medicine. Okay, so they give him medication, and you know, I found out all this information. It created what we would call cognitive dissonance. And so it was my childhood programming conflicting with the new knowledge I was given. And this is purposely done to crucify me. This is purposely done to put me at odds with myself, and to create what we would call loosh. Because the people that govern this reality, they're very disgusting. You know, they shouldn't have a gavel. They should have a mirror. Like, really. They are sick. They really are sick. You know, I try to rationalize with all the crucifixion and the torture that I go through. And believe me, I have lots of torture that I experience from these beings. But in all the torture that I have endured, when I look at these beings and how they create this cognitive dissonance by, you know, shrouding you in ignorance in the beginning and then flooding you with a whole bunch of knowledge toward the end, how that creates a war within yourself. And so, you know, it's very difficult for you to balance yourself when you've been, you know, when you've been reared to believe something, and then when you find out that your beliefs are not totally true, and there's omissions of the truth and really downright lies. You know, some of this stuff is downright lies. And so based upon, you know, Egyptian and Greek mythology and so forth. And so, you know, cognitive dissonance sets in. One of the cognitive dissonance examples that I want to share with you was when I would say my DNA became activated and I had more connection with the astral realm, my handler from the astral. And my handler is King James of Scotland. That's the elite that actually governs my existence, if you will, and programmed me. And you know, it was funny because, you know, during the time that I was getting into the New Age movement, which is designed to kill the solar plexus, to kill Jesus. The New Age movement is not anything good. But because I was a very feminine person anyway, very feminine principle. And so all of the things in the New Age are very feminine. Eating vegetables is very feminine, getting you more in tune with the spiritual, psychological. Meditation is also like that, you know, getting you very much in tune with the psychological. What is it? You know, all of these different things that you practice within the New Age oftentimes is to make you super feminine or psychological. And so, you know, when I started to become, you know, when my Kundalini started coming back, it came back in very filthy, nasty, disgusting ways. And so all the times that when I was a little girl and I was shown pornography, and what is it? You know, all the times that you know, I was molested, and you know, all of the unconscious programming and things I saw but didn't see, or heard but didn't hear. You know, all those things started to come back. And so whenever you're not honoring the masculine aspect of yourself, it's very nasty and disgusting. You have very nasty and disgusting thoughts. And so, you know, you are, you become empathic. That's why it says Jesus took on the sins of the world. So I started taking on the sins of the world, quote unquote, and experiencing what I would call the collective unconscious mind. And so, you know, I really want to do a separate video on the collective unconscious, but the collective unconscious deals with taking on the filth of all of the seeming egos of the world. Okay? And so one thing about the unconscious is a masculine energy and is connected to the solar plexus, or Jesus is connected to your earthly sacral. And so whenever you are debasing and restricting that aspect of yourself, it's a very sexual nature, and so it becomes very sexually debased. And so a lot of the thoughts I had was very nasty, and when I would get close to people, I would have nasty, filthy thoughts, and I thought to myself, what is that? And so it was actually taking upon other people's sins as my own. So what does that mean? Like, as an angel, right, as an ego, you know, I'm very nice and sweet, and I was conditioned to be that way. I'm not taking responsibility for that. That's just how I was conditioned. Turn the other cheek, you know. It's like kissing people's asses is not unlike me. I was taught to turn the other cheek and kiss people's asses. And so, you know, as a result, this conflicted with what I would call the outer world, or the world at large. And so when I used to look down upon people for having like certain sexual fetishes and things like that. And no, actually, that's a lie. I never really looked down on people for having certain sexual fetishes. I was just like, you know what, I never would do those things myself. I never really cared about what people did, to be honest with you. I mean, your stuff is your stuff, you know what I mean? Like, if you're gay or straight, or, you know, or what have you. You know, I never really cared, but I started to take on people's stuff as my own. And so to feel somebody as yourself is very, I don't know, it's just very difficult. Like, okay, let me give you an example. I had a really good friend, and you know, as I was transitioning, transitioning, you know, trying to get my career off the ground and stuff like that, she allowed me to stay with her and her family. She has a husband, and she has 2 beautiful children. And you know, this friend of mine, I really look up to her because she's really, I don't know, she's just a good soul. I love her energy. She has a very good energy. She's very smart, and she's very just fun. And you know, she's stylish and so forth. And so, you know, I really felt like she kind of balanced my energy really good. And you know, so when she invited me to, you know, come over to her house, although her house is like bonkers because she has 2 little kids, you know, I said to myself, why not? You know, I was trying to save money at the time, and you know, trying to kind of stack my resources. But her husband, it was you know, very different. He was not mean per se, but you know, he had more of a I don't know, it's more of a darker energy. And so I felt a very strong, very strong sexual attraction to her husband. And so I said to myself, that's crazy, you know, because you know, and this goes to show how there's a, you know, how there's like a separation, if you will. And the thing is that, you know, I felt very uncomfortable around him because there was an intense sexual attraction to him. And so I said to myself, that's weird, that's crazy. And really, to be honest with you, as an ego, I really didn't feel that he was cute. You know, I was like, he's just not cute. And he looked, well, you know, he doesn't, how do I put this? You know, he's definitely not my type. Let's just say that. Like, if I saw him, you know, out and about, if I saw him at the bar, I would never say, oh, I've got to have that guy. And so this also let me know that this is not me per se. You know, this is not this ego that I carry that's attracted to this person. But I was getting this from him. And so because he had that attraction for me, I was feeling his attraction for me as if it were my own. I was feeling his attraction for me as if it were my own. And so it created within me a war within myself, because there was two me's. So there was the me of, oh, I mean, I love my friend to death. I would never want to sleep with her husband, you know. She has a beautiful family, beautiful house. She's nice enough to let me into her, into her house, and to have, spend some time with her and have some fun, and enjoy her and the kids and stuff like that. But then there's this me that has this sexual attraction to her husband. And so when I experienced that, and I realized that it wasn't me, but it was him, and I was feeling him as myself. It was very hard to reconcile. And so it goes to show that when you're ascending, you take on the sins of the world. Other people's sins become your own, and you start to feel someone as you feel yourself. And so that's for good or bad. So, like, for example, my friend, like I said, she's fun and exciting and smart and stuff like that. So being around her, I naturally felt those positive things. But being around her husband, he was darker, and he drank and stuff like that a good bit. And I felt those dark aspects also, as if it was me. So as empaths, we don't really get a chance, we don't really get a say in terms of what we would, I guess, we don't really get a say in terms of what we feel. If it were me, I would just kick her husband out, and me and her would, have fun together. But you don't get a chance to get rid of the so-called quote unquote devil and keep the angel. You know what I mean? And so in this lifetime, although that's not my doing, I'm considered to be an angel. I'm considered to be an angel. And I know I don't want people to think on this channel, oh my gosh, she's making herself sound really great and wonderful. No, because I'm not an angel, nor am I a devil. In truth, as Christ, I am neither good or bad. I am neither the saint or the sinner. Christ is here to torch the sky. The sky houses two celestial bodies that we can see: the sun and the moon. The sun represents the angel, which is consciousness, and the moon represents, the devil, or the unconscious mind, or the veil, devil veil. And so Christ is here to actually destroy the whole set, to destroy the sky. I'm not here to just destroy this ego that's like, oh my gosh, I just want to enjoy my friend, but I'm also, here to destroy this other aspect, this darker aspect that's like, oh, I don't want to copulate with your husband, or the husband that wants to copulate with me, but I feel that I want to copulate with the husband. That aspect is also, I'm also here to destroy that aspect as well, because they're both fallacies. The saint and the sinner is both a fallacy. It's not real. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. And so, Christ is here to actually not identify with the illusion, but Satan, or Saturn, is actually used to, I guess what you would say, to give into the illusion. And so whenever you have Saturn or Satan, you have separation. But Christ actually embraces both the saint and the sinner to really bring them together, so it nullifies them in a way. You can see past the tricks, if you will, of the matrix, and really see that, whatever you are not. Whatever somebody else is, they are not either. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that right, or the way that people can, totally understand what I'm talking about. But it's just that you develop you have to, in a way, although I preach against dissociation, in a way you have to dissociate a little bit to really exist within two worlds. So really I'm stuck between two worlds, or what you would call purgatory, two places of consciousness: my physical ego, and also the astral self that's connected to the astral realm, that doesn't have any restrictions and so forth. And so this happens when your Kundalini comes back. And so, talking about cognitive dissonance, and how, your kundalini comes back in very nasty and filthy, disgusting ways because you suppress that masculine aspect of yourself for a long time. It festers, right? It's just like, and I talk about in the Catholic Church, priests can't have to be super psychological or spiritual, right? Duggar, super psychological, spiritual, but then manifests into molestations and things like that. So it's going to come back nasty. And so one of the things that I experienced a whole lot of cognitive dissonance with is numerology. Because when I was activated by King James of Scotland from the astral realm, I was made to partake in, like I said, very feminine practices such as numerology. And so numerology is a practice that teaches you to decode. Whenever you're using your mind and thinking a lot, that's psychological, that's spiritual, quote unquote spiritual. And so I got in tune with an angel intuitive. Her name is Doreen Virtue. She took her site down, by the way. That should tell you something. And so Doreen Virtue, really, she had something on her website. She's an angel intuitive, and she had a part of her website that was dedicated to numerology or angel numbers. And when you look at angel numbers, basically is numerology. When you see a number, if you see a repetition of a number, it's a so-called angel that's trying to give you a message. And so when I started, seeing numbers and things like that after studying numerology for a certain period of time, I really stopped seeing numbers in a way. I would just see codes. And my mind would start to work. And I would start to decipher what these numbers were. So this is psychological. So I was being really made to be psycho. and I just broke because, going back to cognitive dissonance and how cognitive dissonance is when you are being put against yourself with contradictions. The kundalini is very nasty. When you've suppressed the kundalini and it reactivates, your melanin activates, it starts to psychologically whip you. And then in practicing angel numbers or numerology, because there was one number in particular, which was the number 11. That's why, 1111, they're like, oh, if you see that synchronicity, 1111, that's like, you're in the right direction. But like I said before, the New Age is designed to kill Jesus. And so 1111 was the worst, or 11 was the worst number, because 11, the number 11 was to keep your thoughts positive, because they're quickly manifesting into form. And so, the fact that my kundalini was rising, right? But then I would see the number 11, anytime I would see the number 11 or 1111, and it was telling me to keep my thoughts positive. This is a contradiction. So King James of Scotland was intentionally crucifying me and really destroying my mind, because he was, once he knew that my kundalini would, come back in a very nasty way, but turning me on to numerology and making me do numerology, and how numerology teaches you to keep your mind positive because they're quickly, your thoughts quickly manifest into form. You can't possibly do that with a nasty kundalini like mine. Like, my kundalini is nasty, filthy, and disgusting. And so those positive thoughts, like, you can't have positive thoughts when the kundalini is rising within you. At least within my type of soul. And so this is very evil. And he's a very evil man. He's a very evil man. I don't really know how he's gotten so evil, but I mean, King James of Scotland, he wrote a book called Demonology, and he is well versed in black magic. And so, the thing is that these beings that govern this reality, they think that if they're not, quote unquote, physically harming you, that they're not harming you. But the thing is that, they don't have feelings. They are powers that be. They live in heaven. And so when you don't have feelings and you live in heaven, you don't have feelings, you don't really necessarily care what you do to hurt the feelings of someone else. They're like, oh, I'm not physically touching you, but when you feed contradictions into the consciousness, it is worse than physical. I'll be honest with you, it is worse than physical. When someone is destroying your mind. I don't really understand the logic behind these beings, but I know they're super psycho and crazy. And so King James of Scotland is crazy. He is Satan. And so, just to see all the psychological issues that were, all the torture tactics that were placed upon me to create cognitive dissonance, which is a discrepancy between beliefs within one mind, contradictions within the mind, and how that plays out. It's very, I don't know, it's very disgusting. I could never do that to somebody. And he relentlessly imposes, what you would say, torture tactics, if you will, torturing me. And so I'm definitely living within a state of hell under King James of Scotland's thumb. And so, when you look at the contradictions in the Bible, and you look at the contradictions in A Course in Miracles, which he is responsible for as well, although from a I guess you would say superficial standpoint he's not, but the King James version of the Bible, superficially he's definitely responsible for that. We know that he is. There's no excuse for all the contradictions. I mean, there's so many of them. There are tons of them. And so whenever you're feeding contradictions into the mind, you are destroying the mind. You're destroying the mind, and you're preventing the mind from getting balance. And so, going back through, all of the various aspects of my crucifixion, everything that I was asked to do from the astral realm by King James of Scotland, he facilitated an environment that would prevent me from doing it. It's very sick. I really don't understand how evil and disgusting and filthy and degenerate this man is, but I do believe that I am to meet King James of Scotland once I give up this mind and body. But it's very difficult because, on the astral realm, I'm supposed to be very much, love King James of Scotland as an ego. I do not, of course. And all the stuff that he's put me through, I think that he would want me to hate him at this point. But, the thing is that, I don't hate anyone. I don't hate any person. But it's going to be very interesting for him to sit in front of me and to explain, without nailing me to the cross. See, nailing me to the cross, like I said, I'm wedded and I like this. I love this person on the other side. So, in loving this person on the other side, I have no connection to the love of King James of Scotland from this ego perspective. But regardless of what, being in that realm or the astral realm, I really don't understand how this unconscious aspect of me or masculine astral aspect of me could even be affiliated with people that do this to people. I really don't. Just flat out lie and torture people. You're a liar. You're a thief, really. You've stolen my soul and you've stolen my life. And so I really don't understand how you have the audacity to sit in front of me and to judge me. I really don't get it. You need a mirror. You don't need a gavel. And so, King James of Scotland, he gets off scot-free. Hence the word Scot. King James of Scotland. That's where that term comes from. Because he owns all the souls that are projected in this matrix environment. And so he gets off scot-free. Why is that? Why is it that you get to feed contradictions into the mind, cause cognitive dissonance or crucifixion, crucify Jesus, crucify the solar plexus, and so forth? He has laid out my entire life, but he blames me for it. I'm sorry. You get credit with being the creator or the maker. I equate, in my book Follow, I equate King James of Scotland to, to what you call it, to like a parent who blindfolds you, a handler, like I'm sitting down and my handler is like, let's play a game, and I'm like, okay, and he calls himself my father, right? So daddy's like, let's play a game. So I say, okay. And so he blindfolds me. He says, but no. He says, I want you to draw me a picture. And I say, okay, but he blindfolds me. And so he said, I want you to draw a picture, although you can't see the picture. And then I want you to take a pen or markers or whatever, and I want you to draw the picture, but I'm going to guide your hand. And so the thing is that at the end, once the picture is drawn, then he rips off the blindfold. And then he says, look what you drew. And it's a very effed up picture. And I'm like, oh gosh, that picture is horrible. Who drew that? I don't even know who drew it. And he says, oh, you drew it. And I'm like, oh, no, Daddy, I did not draw that picture. He's like, yeah, you did. But, he doesn't want to acknowledge. Never does. Always has some type of loophole because he's a lawyer in a lie room. He says, well, you drew that picture, but I was blindfolded. I wasn't conscious. I was not. How can you blame me for something I was not conscious of? How? Well, Daddy, you guided, you my handler. You guided my hand. I wouldn't have, if I had the blindfold off, I wouldn't have drawn that picture. If you weren't guiding my hand, then I would have drawn something beautiful, more balanced, right? But he says, oh no, you didn't. You get to hang on the cross for that. I'm sorry. Go to hell. That's how I would tell Daddy right now, or Saddy, or whatever he is, because he's a sad soul. Sad. And so, it's funny. I really, really do hope that I get to meet my handler. It's going to be very difficult to be nailed to the cross of the unconscious, this masculine aspect of myself that's on the astral, that really cares for these elites and these crazy, sadistic people that need mirrors. There's some sickos. The elite are sick. They're like on the Hunger Games. You remember when on the Hunger Games when Katniss and Peeta, they go to a function with the elite. And the elite, when, one of the elite comes over and asks Katniss, does she try all the food? And so they give her some type of drink. And she's like, what's this? And they say, well, this will make you throw up. So you can try it. How else would you try everything here? What the hell is that? The elite are crazy. That's crazy. You have an elixir. You're like, I'm so ill or satanic that I have to drink stuff to throw up so I can try everything to eat here. You don't need a gavel. You need a mirror. You are sick, filthy, disgusting. And you deserve to be brought to judgment. Because you are my elder does not mean that you are right. Because you are older does not mean that you are right. You are sick. You need to look at yourself. Okay? And you need to practice what you preach. Because you definitely don't practice what you preach. When I was a little girl, I used to get my ass kicked for saying the word lie. And the one who kicked my ass for saying lie was the one who was lying. Come on now. Crickets. You know what I mean? There's going to be crickets when that comes out. How is it that you get to tell me to do stuff, but you can't do them? When I was a teacher, I couldn't do the things I told my kids not to do. If I said don't curse and I came in every day cursing, how could I reprimand my kids for cursing? That's what I'm doing. Kids learn by what they see, not by what you tell them to do. And as elders, they tell us to do things, and they do far worse. You are disgusting, and you disgust me. You can't even sit in my presence. That's why you're a troll. The elders are trolls. They have to control this realm this reality from another realm, because they do not have the audacity to sit in my face and to actually disclose and say the things that has been done, that they are doing to this soul that I have. This is sick. And they like doing it behind closed doors. That's the thing about them. They're so sick. Like, you know, it's funny. The thing is that pop culture definitely gives way to King James of Scotland and the elite and their agenda. They put things out there all the time. People call movies and, you know, videos and songs and things like that the new hieroglyphs, if you will, of you know, modern day society. And so E.L. James, L is Satan. That's the ancient Hebrew name for Satan. James relates to King James of Scotland. E.L. James is the author of 50 Shades of Grey. And 50 Shades of Grey represents King James of Scotland. And, you know, I lost my train of thought for a second, but, you know, when it comes to 50 Shades of Grey, the elite, they don't want to be found out. Like, for example, you know, Christian Grey, he beats people to feel better. Like at the end of the first movie, you can see when he really literally starts to feel better from beating Anastasia. But he wants her to sign a contract, and it's like, don't talk about the things that we do. Are you crazy? Why don't you want people to talk about the things that you do? You beat people to feel better. You have all these fetishes and things like that, and you want to put, you know, butt plugs in people and do anal fisting and things like that. But, oh, you need to sign a contract because I don't want people to know. You want me to tell the truth? And you want me to be fully disclosed to people out here? But you yourself can't disclose the things that you do. That's being such a hypocrite. To me, that's not having big balls. See, I thought people who had big sacrals, who could manifest their desires, I thought that they had big balls. But they don't. So, you know, here, I don't have my sacral intact. But you have your sacral intact, right? But you don't have the courage to disclose the things that you do. And you want to convict me for doing little things. I don't really do anything, actually. I'm a saint. So, to be honest with you, so they really can't come in front of me with anything. You know, whatever they're showing me that I'm doing on the astral is a direct result of what they're doing to me as an ego, as a slave. So, you know, as a saint, since I'm sexually prudish here, but I'm a filthy, disgusting whore there, they're benefiting from me being a whore in the astral. And if they actually were to relax the limitations that I received in the physical, then I wouldn't be a filthy whore there. But they want me to hang on the cross with that whore. They want to cross my ego with this filthy, disgusting whore on the astral. You know what they need? They need a lighter B. And like in that song, I love it, Kanye West and I can't remember the other guy, but they said, like a lighter bee, she ignorant. See, they want less soul. Soul is connected to your melanin. So see, I have too much melanin now. I'm almost through. But they need a lighter version of myself so they could actually impose judgment. And for me to believe that. See, when you go through the zodiac, you go through all of the various demigods, if you will, of the zodiac, like Jesus and Krishna and Allah and all of them. See, Jesus always tells them to go to you know where during judgment, because Jesus always has too much melanin for them. Melanin tells the truth. So they don't like crucifying Jesus, really, to be honest with you. Crucifying Jesus is like eating off the dollar menu at the McDonald's. You know what I mean? You don't get a really good tasty meal off of Jesus, you know? But, you know, as you progress on, because the less melanin you have, right? The less melanin, the better, the tastier you are, you know? So, you know, the thing about it is that, you know, Jesus is, you know, sees past the BS. So you can't hang me really on a cross of filthiness and expect me to take ownership of it. See? So, like, for example, going back to my friend and, you know, my girlfriend that I love so much, and how, you know, her husband, you know, how her husband, you know, really, you know, had a connection, some type of sexual wanting, if you will, for me. And how I, you know, I really, you know, just felt, I guess, what's the word? You know, I felt such a, you know, a strong, just a strong pull toward him in a sexual way. And the fact that, you know, without the inside of my pineal gland, I would think that it's me. As empaths, we can't really tell the difference between us and other people. And so, you know, it's very, very interesting how the less melanin you have, like if I had less melanin and less connection to my pineal gland, then I wouldn't be able to tell that, and I would feel guilty. And believe me, I felt guilty because I love my girlfriend. I would never cheat with her husband or whatever. And, you know, to have had those feelings and to feel his sexual desire as my own was like someone killing me. Like taking on the sins of the world. Like someone, you know, although it wasn't a physical stabbing, it was like someone was stabbing me in my heart. And I felt bad. I was like, wow, you're such a horrible person. But it wasn't me. It reminds me of that movie Strange Days with Ray Fiennes and Angela Bassett, and how they have a software. In the movie, they had a software. It's called Squid software. And so the thing is that with Squid software, if someone's wearing software during a memory, right, during something that they did, you could actually experience their memories as your own. And so you would feel the things that they would feel. And so in the movie, there's a woman, her name is Iris. And Iris, she witnesses an assassination of a prominent black man that the government was trying to get rid of. And because she saw this, she was being sought after. And the person that was there to kill her, when he killed her, I think he rapes her too. What he does is he switches his software with her software. And so in switching their software, she experiences him killing her, but not only him killing her, but her being killed. Does that make sense? So she's experiencing being the killer, the victim, and the victimizer at the same time. So this is an example of what cognitive dissonance is, or crucifixion is, if you will. And so what I'm going to do is, you know, because this video is a little longer, I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to come back to do a part 2 of this video where I talk about, you know, more about King James of Scotland, and talk about, you know, cognitive dissonance a little bit, kind of review and recap a lot of things that I've said in this video, and also talk about Masonry, talk about Freemasonry, talk about gang stalking, and how, you know, the intention, because like I've said in most of my other videos or gang stalking videos, whenever you're vibrating high, you become a threat, if you will, to the system, where you can ground your desires into physical reality. You're not a slave anymore. And so because of that, and you're being targeted, really what's being targeted is your solar plexus, is Jesus, the Son of God, because the Son is here to collect. It's kind of like your Saturn return, as they call it. You're here to collect all of the things that have been taken away from you. And so the purpose is to make sure that you don't get the things that have been taken. And so I'm going to talk about that, and talk about how I was purposely put into a family where I was taken most weekends to have my kundalini brought out with molestation. And how it's come full circle that was the intention, and that's connected to my gang stalking. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this down, guys, and I'm going to, you know, come back with part 2 of this video. So thanks very much for listening.